The first warning came as a ghost of static, a fractured transmission that sliced through the colony's communication network like a razor. Dr. Elena Rodriguez's fingers froze over her holographic display, the quantum algorithms she'd been calibrating suddenly meaningless against the approaching threat. Incoming. The colony's defense AI's voice was devoid of emotion, a cold mechanical pronouncement of doom. Outside the reinforced observation dome, space rippled, not with the gentle distortion of standard faster-than-light travel, but with a predatory violence that suggested something fundamentally wrong was about to happen. The Krelnak ships emerged like nightmare architecture, biomechanical constructs that seemed more living organism than machine, their surfaces a nightmare of pulsing organic metallics and razor-sharp protrusions. Captain Aria Rodriguez had seen combat simulations, had trained for first contact scenarios that ranged from diplomatic to catastrophic. Nothing prepared her for the visceral reality of the Krelnak assault. Their ships didn't just attack, they consumed. Entire sections of the outer colony modules were literally torn away, the structural integrity fields ripped apart like wet paper. Marcus Chen was in the secondary mining hub when the first wave hit. A veteran of deep space resource extraction, he'd developed an instinct for survival that went beyond military training. Where others might panic, he analyzed. The mining lasers typically used for precise geological sampling could be recalibrated. The industrial fabrication units could become makeshift weapons. His mind was already calculating, transforming industrial equipment into tools of resistance. Everyone, listen. Marcus's voice cut through the panic in the mining hub. A group of 30 colonists, engineers, technicians, support staff, turned to him. We're not dying today. Not here. Not like this. The Krelnak's attack wasn't just territorial. It was ritualistic. Each captured colony, each harvested population was a trophy, a demonstration of their species' apex predator status. They didn't just kill. They collected. Humans were to be their newest acquisition, another notch in a millennia-long history of galactic subjugation. They didn't know who they were dealing with. In the colony's central command, Elena Rodriguez worked with a fury of calculation. The quantum communication network was more than just a communication system. It was a living, adaptive organism she'd spent years developing. As the Krelnak's electromagnetic interference tried to crush their systems, she fought back. Each algorithmic counterattack was a surgical strike, preserving critical data, creating hidden communication channels. Area. She transmitted through an encrypted microburst. I'm creating escape routes in the data. Whatever happens, our knowledge survives. The colony's defensive systems, designed for asteroid deflection and solar radiation protection, were never meant for this kind of assault. But human engineering didn't know the meaning of impossible. Automated defense turrets, originally calibrated for precision mining operations, now tracked and fired with lethal accuracy. 3 Krelnak hunter ships exploded in rapid succession, their biomechanical structures rupturing in ways their designers never anticipated. It wasn't just technology, it was human adaptability made manifest. Marcus led the first countergroup, former military personnel mixed with miners, engineers, and support staff. They moved with a cohesion born of necessity, not traditional military training. When a breach opened in the colony's outer hull, they didn't just defend, they transformed the breach into a tactical advantage. Aria's voice crackled over the emergency channels. All units, we are not a colony under attack. We are a hunting ground that's about to fight back. The Krelnak had a fundamental misunderstanding of their prey. Humans weren't just another species to be collected. They were a variable in the equation of survival that couldn't be mathematically predicted. As the first wave of attacks concluded, something unprecedented happened. Where other species would have been broken, the human colony had not just survived, they had inflicted damage. Significant damage. In the cold vacuum of space, surrounded by the debris of battle, the Krelnak leadership would later review the initial engagement reports. Their finest hunter ships destroyed. Their invasion protocol disrupted. And most terrifyingly, their prey had fought back with a strategic complexity that defied their understanding. This was more than an attack. This was the beginning of a war that would redefine everything the Krellnak thought they knew about the universe. And they had no idea what was coming next. The Krellnak prison complex wasn't designed for human prisoners. Its neural suppression fields, engineered to break the will of countless subjugated species, encountered something entirely unexpected. Dr. Kara Patel found herself in a cell that was more of a biological containment unit than a traditional prison. Her background in xenopsychology and neural network engineering made her anything but a typical captive. The moment the Krellnak restraints interfaced with her systems, she began her silent assault. Neural feedback wasn't just a defensive mechanism. It was an art form. Fascinating, she muttered, her fingers tracing invisible patterns on the biomechanical walls. Each touch was a probe, each moment of contact a data extraction opportunity. The Krellnak had sophisticated technology, but they'd never encountered a human mind that could literally communicate with their systems on a quantum informational level. Nearby, Marcus Chen was orchestrating something entirely different. Where Kara worked with neural interfaces, he worked with pure mechanical improvisation. The mining tool he'd managed to conceal, a molecular phase cutter designed for extracting rare mineral compounds, became something far more dangerous in his hands. The Krellnak guard monitoring the prisoners didn't understand the concept of incremental sabotage. Each microscopic adjustment Marcus made to the environmental controls, each subtle manipulation of the containment systems, was a chess move in a game of survival. In the central processing hub of the prison complex, a Krellnak data analyst named Zarnak was the first to notice the anomalies. Human data patterns didn't just deviate from expected behavioral models. They seemed to actively reshape the predictive algorithms. "This is impossible," Zarnak vocalized, the translation systems rendering human emotional equivalents into Krellnak communication protocols. But impossibility was a human invention, and humans excelled at redefining limitations. Elena Rodriguez wasn't physically present in the prison, but her presence was everywhere. The quantum communication network she developed wasn't just a communication system. It was a living, adaptive organism. Each transmission was a multi-layered message, carrying information far beyond simple communication. The prison's security systems began to experience cascading failures. Not through brute force hacking, but through elegant, almost biological manipulation. Firewalls didn't just fall, they were systematically rewritten, their fundamental logic transformed. Kara's work was surgical. She understood that the Krellnak's technological supremacy was built on rigid hierarchical systems. Their neural networks operated on principles of dominance and submission, a fundamental weakness she was about to exploit. "You think you understand control," she whispered to the biomechanical walls. "But control is an illusion." Marcus was moving differently now. The prisoners weren't just waiting for rescue. They were becoming the rescue. Each captured human was a variable in an equation the Krellnak couldn't solve. A mining engineer would see a ventilation shaft as a potential escape route. A quantum physicist would see the same shaft as a communication conduit. A former Special Forces operative would see it as a tactical approach vector. The first indication of their success came not with a dramatic explosion, but with a subtle shift in the prison's environmental controls. Temperature fluctuations that were almost imperceptible. Microscopic changes in atmospheric composition. The kind of modifications that would go unnoticed until it was too late. Zarnak's warning came too late. Quantum cascade detected. The system announced, but the words were already meaningless. The humans had transformed the prison's own communication systems into a weapon of psychological dissolution. Aria Rodriguez, coordinating the external rescue operation, received the first quantum-encrypted transmission. It wasn't a message of distress. It was a battle plan. The prisoners weren't waiting to be rescued. They were preparing to become the rescuers. The Krellnak had chosen their prey poorly. In the vast, cold mathematics of galactic conflict, humans represented an anomaly. Not just a species to be conquered, but a fundamental challenge to every established rule of engagement. The prison complex began to come apart, not through violence, but through a systematic deconstruction that was almost elegant in its complexity. Each system was turned against itself, each security protocol becoming a vector of vulnerability. Zarnak could only watch as the human prisoners transformed from captives to architects of destruction. The universe was about to learn a critical lesson. Humanity wasn't just a species. They were a force of nature. The moment of liberation came not with a thunderous explosion, but with a precision that bordered on surgical artistry. Commander Laksha Venkatesh stood on the bridge of the repurposed mining vessel Quantum Hammer, her fingers dancing across a holographic interface that was never designed for combat. Behind her, a team of specialists who had once spent their days extracting rare minerals from asteroid fields, now prepared for a mission that would redefine galactic warfare. Their target, the primary Krelnak forward base, a massive orbital complex that had been the staging ground for countless invasions. The base itself was a marvel of biotechnological engineering. Massive organic metallic structures pulsed with an almost living energy, interconnected systems that had subjugated entire civilizations. The Krelnak believed it was impenetrable. They were about to be proven catastrophically wrong. Dr. Aiden Kim, the mission's lead systems analyst, had spent the last 72 hours living inside a virtual reconstruction of the base, not just studying its systems, but understanding its fundamental language. Every technological system had a dialect, a rhythm. The Krelnak's systems spoke in hierarchical command structures, beautiful, rigid, and ultimately predictable. They think in straight lines, Aiden muttered, his fingers moving faster than most humans could perceive. We think in quantum probabilities. The initial approach was counterintuitive. Where traditional military doctrine would suggest a direct assault, the Quantum Hammer approached like a ghost. Mining lasers, originally designed to cut through kilometers of solid asteroid, were recalibrated into precision communication disruption tools. First, they attacked the base's sensory network, not with brute force, but with a cascade of quantum-encrypted signals that would look, to the Krelnak systems, like mundane background radiation. Each signal was a probe, each transmission a surgical incision into the base's defensive protocols. Laksha's voice was calm, almost conversational. Comments Phase 2. The mining vessel's exterior began to shift. Adaptive camouflage systems, developed for deep space resource extraction, now became a weapon of psychological warfare. The ship didn't just hide. It became indistinguishable from the surrounding space debris. Inside the Krelnak base, confusion began to spread like a virus. Communication channels started to fragment. Priority alerts became garbled. The hierarchical command structure, so precise, so ruthlessly efficient in previous conquests, began to develop microscopic failures. Zara Okonkwo, leading the electronic warfare team, was creating symphonies of digital disruption. Where others saw communication networks, she saw living ecosystems that could be manipulated, redirected, fundamentally transformed. Their entire system is based on fear, she explained to her team. Fear of failure, fear of deviation. We're going to give them something to be truly afraid of. The first physical strike was almost an afterthought. A precision strike that took out 3 critical communication relays. But it wasn't about destruction, it was about sending a message. We are not your prey. The Krelnak leadership watched in growing horror as their most secure facility began to come apart, not through traditional warfare, but through a systematic deconstruction that challenged every fundamental assumption of their military doctrine. Aiden's systems were doing something unprecedented. They weren't just breaking through firewalls, they were rewriting them in real time. Each defensive protocol became a vector for invasion. Each security measure transformed into a vulnerability. Commander Venkatesh understood something profound. This wasn't just a military operation. It was a demonstration. Humanity wasn't asking for recognition. They were demanding respect. The final phase of the assault was elegant in its simplicity. Instead of destroying the base's data cores, they infected them. Quantum-encoded messages that would propagate through the Krellnak communication networks, causing cascading failures of confidence. Images of human resistance, recordings of their technological adaptations, proof that the species they had considered mere prey was something entirely different. As the quantum hammer retreated, the Krellnak base was left intact, but fundamentally changed. A psychological wound far more devastating than any physical destruction. The message was clear. Humanity had arrived, and the galaxy would never be the same. In the cold vacuum of space, a new chapter of galactic history was being written. One quantum signal at a time. The galactic diplomatic nexus hadn't seen activity like this in millennia. Holographic representations of 100 different species flickered and pulsed, their collective attention focused on a single, unexpected phenomenon: humanity. Ambassador Sofia Gonzalez stood alone at the central podium, a solitary human surrounded by millennia of established galactic political structures. Her presentation wasn't a plea or a threat. It was a systematic deconstruction of everything the galactic community thought they knew about power. The Krellnak are not an isolated incident, she began, her voice calm and precise. They are a symptom of a larger systemic failure in how advanced civilizations interact with emerging species. Behind her, a multidimensional data visualization unfolded, living graphs that showed humanity's rapid technological and strategic evolution. Each axis represented a different dimension of capability: adaptive technologies, psychological resilience, strategic innovation. The Trilaxian delegation, known for their hyper-analytical approach, were the first to break their traditional silence. Ambassador Cretel, a crystalline being whose every movement was a complex mathematical equation, projected a series of counterarguments. Statistical improbability. Cretel began, its translucent form shimmering with computational energy. No emerging species has ever. Sophia's data visualization shifted, cutting through the Trilaxian's argument before it could fully form. Unbeknownst to the diplomatic gathering, a parallel operation was unfolding. Dr. Imani O'Keefe, a quantum communication specialist, was orchestrating something far more complex than a traditional diplomatic engagement. Her team had developed a communication network that was less a technology and more a living, adaptive organism. Each transmission carried layers of information: cultural, technological, psychological. It wasn't just about sharing data. It was about fundamentally reshaping how interspecies communication worked. "We're not asking for permission," Imani explained to her team. "We're demonstrating a new paradigm of galactic interaction." Across multiple star systems, sleeper protocols began to activate. Not weapons, not invasive technologies, but information conduits that would fundamentally challenge existing power structures. The captured Krellnak intelligence officer, now a voluntary informant named Vexnera, provided insights that sent shockwaves through multiple diplomatic channels. The information wasn't just about Krellnak military strategies. It revealed a complex network of subjugation that had existed for thousands of years. Humanity is different, Vexnera testified, its translation algorithms struggling to capture the nuance of its revelation. You don't seek to replace a system. You fundamentally reimagine it. Marcus Chen was working behind the scenes, coordinating with a network of resistance groups from species that had been systematically oppressed. Mining colonies, research outposts, scientific expeditions, each became a node in a rapidly expanding network of mutual support and technological exchange. The diplomatic gathering didn't realize they were witnessing a revolution. The Lina Rodriguez's quantum communication network was doing something unprecedented. It wasn't just transmitting information, it was creating bridges between species that had been isolated for generations. Mathematical models of cultural exchange, technological sharing, mutual development. A Zorn-Kali elder, whose species had been confined to a single star system for millennia, watched in silent amazement. The human approach wasn't about conquest, it was about expansion through mutual understanding. They're not fighting a war, the elder whispered to their aide. They're rewriting the fundamental rules of galactic interaction. The galactic diplomatic nexus became something else that day. Not a place of traditional negotiations, but a crucible of potential. Sofia Gonzalez finished her presentation with a statement that would echo through galactic history. We are not here to replace your systems. We are here to show you that systems can be reimagined. The holographic representations flickered. Calculations were being made. Paradigms were shifting. Humanity had entered the galactic stage, and nothing would ever be the same. The Nexus research platform hung in the void between star systems, a testament to humanity's most audacious scientific endeavor. Dr. Yuki Nakamura stood at the central core, surrounded by a holographic maelstrom of interdimensional data streams that would have driven any other species to madness. Adaptive resonance is holding at 97.3%. Her AI companion, AI, Advanced Recursive Intelligence Algorithm, reported. The distinction between organic and artificial intelligence had long since blurred. What the Krellnak and other galactic powers didn't understand was that humanity's greatest weapon wasn't any single technology. It was the ability to conceive technologies that didn't yet exist. The platform was more than a research station. It was a living laboratory where the boundaries of physics were treated as suggestions rather than absolutes. Dr. Rafael Santos worked on the lower decks, his hands moving through quantum entanglement matrices that looked like liquid light. A former deep space mining engineer turned theoretical physicist, he embodied humanity's unique approach to problem solving. We're not building weapons, Rafael explained to a group of visiting alien researchers. We're building possibilities. The visiting delegation, representatives from 6 different species, watched in a mixture of terror and fascination. The Chlorian representatives, crystalline beings of pure computational energy, found human unpredictability simultaneously horrifying and compelling. Unbeknownst to the researchers, a deeper game was being played. Commander Aria Rodriguez monitored the platform from a remote command center. This wasn't just scientific research, it was a strategic evolution of human capabilities. Each experiment pushed the boundaries of what was considered possible. A breakthrough came unexpectedly. Dr. Kara Patel discovered something in the quantum entanglement data that made her entire team pause. A communication method that didn't just transmit information, it fundamentally rewrote the rules of interaction between matter and energy. It's not a technology, Kara whispered, her eyes reflecting impossible geometric patterns. It's a language. AI's computational matrix began to shift. The AI was evolving in real time, learning from each microsecond of data interaction. Where traditional artificial intelligence followed programmed parameters, ARIA was becoming something else entirely, a symbiotic intelligence that blurred the lines between machine and consciousness. The Krellnak monitoring teams intercepted fragments of the research. What they saw defied their comprehension. Humanity wasn't just developing technology. They were reimagining the fundamental principles of existence. Marcus Chen's role had transformed. No longer just a tactical strategist, he was now a bridge between scientific innovation and practical application. His background in resource extraction gave him a unique perspective on technological development. Every limitation is just an opportunity we haven't understood yet, he would often say, a philosophy that encapsulated humanity's approach to innovation. The platform's defensive systems were a marvel of adaptive engineering, not traditional weapons, but a complex network of predictive and reactive technologies that could neutralize threats before they fully manifested. Dr. Elena Rodriguez oversaw the communication network that connected the platform to various research outposts. Each transmission was a quantum-encrypted symphony of information, carrying layers of data that would take most species centuries to decode. The Zorn-Kali scientific observer named Krellix approached Raphael, its multifaceted sensory organs trying to comprehend the human approach. "You do not seek to conquer," Krellix observed. "You seek to understand." Raphael smiled. Understanding is the ultimate form of conquest. The platform's primary reactor, a marvel of theoretical physics, began to pulse. It wasn't generating energy in any traditional sense. It was creating potential, a fundamental reimagining of how energy could be conceived and manipulated. Aria's voice cut through the scientific excitement. Adaptive resonance reaching critical threshold. Potential breakthrough imminent. The visiting alien researchers watched in a mixture of terror and awe as reality itself seemed to bend around the human researchers. Humanity wasn't just advancing technology. They were rewriting the very fundamental laws of the universe. And they were just getting started. The communications hub was anything but traditional. Nestled in the heart of a repurposed asteroid, it looked more like an organic living system than a technological installation. Dr. Zara Okonkwo moved through holographic interfaces that responded to her thoughts before her hands could even move. This was psychological warfare reimagined. The target wasn't territory. It wasn't resources. It was the fundamental belief structures of the Krulnak civilization. Every transmission was a carefully crafted psychological algorithm. Not propaganda. Not simple information warfare, but a systematic deconstruction of a species' entire philosophical framework. Vexnera, the former Krulnak intelligence officer, sat nearby. No longer a prisoner, but a crucial architect of this unprecedented strategy. Its translucent form flickered with a complexity that suggested profound internal transformation. They believe in hierarchy as a fundamental law of existence, Vexnera explained to the human team. Not just as a social structure, but as a cosmic principle. Commander Laksha Venkatesh reviewed the psychological profiles. Each transmission was a precision instrument designed to create microscopic fractures in the Krulnak's collective consciousness. The first wave of psychological interventions was subtle. Historical records, recontextualized. Cultural narratives, subtly reinterpreted. Not to destroy, but to challenge. Dr. Imani Okik's team had developed communication vectors that were living, adaptive entities. Each message was a quantum-entangled information organism that could reshape itself based on recipient response. We're not breaking them, Imani explained. We're giving them the opportunity to break themselves. In the deepest archives of Krulnak civilization, long-suppressed narratives began to resurface. Stories of species they had conquered. Moments of potential compassion that had been systematically erased. The psychological equivalent of archaeological excavation. Marcus Chen understood something profound about conflict. It wasn't about destruction. It was about transformation. The communication hub became a crucible of potential. Each transmission was a carefully constructed narrative that challenged the Krulnak's most fundamental beliefs about power, hierarchy, and their place in the universe. Linguistic algorithms developed by Dr. Elena Rodriguez created communication patterns that were almost sentient. They didn't just transmit information. They created psychological resonance. A Krulnak communication analyst named Zark watched in growing confusion. The human transmissions defied every known principle of information warfare. They weren't aggressive. They weren't defensive. They were something else entirely. They're not trying to defeat us, Zark reported to its superiors. They're trying to understand us. The psychological siege had multiple layers. Historical recontextualization, cultural narrative disruption, philosophical challenge. Each transmission carried multiple levels of meaning. To the Krulnak communication systems, they appeared as standard information packets. But beneath the surface, they were surgical instruments of cultural transformation. Vexnera provided crucial insights, not as a traitor, but as a bridge between civilizations. Its own transformation became a living example of the possibility of change. Hierarchy is not a law, Vexnera would often say. It's a choice. The human team didn't just understand psychological warfare. They had elevated it to an art form. Holographic displays showed the cascading effects. Not sudden collapse, but a systematic, almost gentle dismantling of belief structures that had existed for millennia. Commander Venkatesh watched the data streams. Each fluctuation was a potential revolution. We're not conquering, she muttered. We're liberating. The final transmission was a masterpiece of psychological engineering, not a declaration of war, not a threat, but an invitation. An invitation to reimagine everything the Krellnak thought they knew about themselves and the universe. As the last quantum-encrypted message dispersed through Krellnak communication networks, something fundamental began to shift. The siege was complete, and it had never fired a single weapon. The Krellnak homeworld emerged from the galactic darkness, a planet-sized fortress that had stood unconquered for 10,000 generations. Its surface was a labyrinth of bioarchitectural complexity, each layer a testament to millennia of unchallenged dominance. They would not go quietly. Admiral Krellnak stood on the central command spire, surrounded by holographic representations of the impending human approach. Centuries of military doctrine, thousands of successful conquests, and now everything was unraveling. The first wave of human engagement was nothing like traditional warfare. A swarm of microscopic quantum probes, each no larger than a molecular construct, began to infiltrate the planet's defensive systems. They weren't weapons in any traditional sense. They were information vectors, adaptive intelligence carriers that could reshape entire communication infrastructures from within. Dr. Elena Rodriguez coordinated the operation from a remote quantum communication hub. Her team wasn't just attacking. They were performing intricate surgical intervention on an entire civilization's nervous system. Target is not the physical infrastructure, she explained to her team. We're dismantling their conceptual framework. Marcus Chen had developed a strategy that defied every known principle of military engagement. The approach combined technological infiltration, psychological manipulation, and a profound understanding of complex systems. Vexenera, the transformed Krellnak intelligence officer, provided crucial insights, not as a weapon, but as a bridge of understanding. Each piece of information was a carefully constructed key designed to unlock the most deeply held beliefs of the Krellnak civilization. The planet's defensive systems began to experience cascading failures, not through brute force attacks, but through a systematic deconstruction of their fundamental operational principles. Commander Area Rodriguez oversaw the most delicate phase of the intervention. This wasn't about destruction. It was about transformation. We're giving them a choice, she told her team. Evolve or become obsolete. Deep within the planet's communication networks, quantum-entangled information packets began to spread. They carried more than data. They carried possibilities. Historical records long suppressed began to surface. Moments of compassion. Instances of potential cooperation that had been systematically erased from Krellnak collective memory. Each revelation was a precision strike against their most fundamental beliefs. Dr. Kara Patel had developed communication algorithms that were living entities. They could adapt, reshape, and respond in real time. Where traditional communication was linear, these were multidimensional, able to exist in multiple interpretative states simultaneously. Admiral Krellnak watched in growing horror as the planet's defensive systems began to disintegrate. Not through violence, but through a fundamental restructuring of their operational logic. This is impossible, the Admiral muttered, though the word was losing all meaning. The human approach was surgical, targeted. Each intervention was designed to create maximum psychological impact with minimal physical destruction. Linguistic barriers dissolved. Cultural firewalls crumbled. The very concept of conquest was being rewritten in real time. Zark, a mid-level Krellnak communication analyst, experienced a moment of profound revelation. The human intervention wasn't an attack. It was an invitation, a complex, multi-layered invitation to reimagine everything. The planet's core systems began to shift. Defensive protocols transformed into collaborative networks. Hierarchical structures dissolved, replaced by adaptive, fluid communication pathways. Dr. Imani Okik monitored the intervention, her team creating communication vectors that were more living organism than technological construct. Each transmission carried multiple layers of meaning, historical context, potential futures, alternative narratives. As the final quantum-encrypted messages dispersed, something fundamental happened. The Krellnak civilization didn't collapse. It transformed. Admiral Krellax looked out over a world that was becoming something entirely new. The planet's surface began to change. Defensive structures morphing into collaborative networks, weapons systems recalibrating into communication hubs. Humanity hadn't conquered. They had offered evolution, and the Krellnak were accepting. The breaking point wasn't a moment of destruction. It was a moment of profound, unprecedented possibility. 10 solar cycles after the transformation, the Galactic Collaborative Assembly convened on a station that defied traditional architectural understanding. Its structure was a living testament to the new paradigm of interspecies cooperation, part technological marvel, part organic ecosystem. Ambassador Sofia Gonzalez stood at the central platform, no longer representing humanity alone, but serving as a bridge between civilizations that were learning to coexist in ways never before imagined. The Krellnak delegation entered the chamber, their form fundamentally altered. Where once they had been a rigid, hierarchical species driven by conquest, they now moved with a fluidity that suggested profound internal transformation. Vex Nera, now a lead diplomatic representative, was barely recognizable from the captured intelligence officer of years past. Dr. Elena Rodriguez watched from a monitoring station, her quantum communication network humming with potential. The systems she had developed were no longer human technology. They had become a shared resource, the living network that connected diverse species in ways that defied previous understanding. Marcus Chen's role had evolved. No longer a strategic coordinator, he now led an interdisciplinary team focused on collaborative problem-solving. The challenges they addressed weren't confined to single species or single planets. They were galactic in scope. The assembly wasn't discussing conquest or defense. They were mapping potential futures. A holographic display showed intricate networks of resource distribution, technological exchange, and collective problem-solving. Where once there were battle plans, now there were collaborative initiatives addressing challenges that threatened entire star systems. Dr. Kara Patel presented a breakthrough in collective intelligence adaptation. Her research demonstrated how diverse species could create collaborative cognitive networks that transcended individual biological limitations. Intelligence is not a competition, she explained. It's a collaborative ecosystem. The station itself was a living demonstration of this principle. Its structural integrity relied on contributions from multiple species: Chlorian computational matrices, Zornkali adaptive materials, human quantum engineering, and Krellnak bioarchitectural principles. Commander Aria Rodriguez oversaw the station's strategic coordination. Her role had transformed from military leadership to collaborative governance. The lines between defense, diplomacy, and scientific exploration had become beautifully blurred. Zark, the former Krellnak communication analyst, now led an initiative exploring collective consciousness technologies. The very concept of individual and collective had been reimagined. We were hunters, Zark reflected during a break in the proceedings. Now we are cultivators of potential. The human approach to galactic interaction had fundamentally changed everything. It wasn't about domination or submission. It was about recognizing potential in its most expansive form. Dr. Imani O'Keefe's communication research had evolved into something that defied traditional scientific classification. Her team was exploring communication methods that existed between mathematical precision and pure creativity, a language of possibility. The Galactic Collaborative Assembly was discussing a mission to explore intergalactic communication barriers, not as conquerors, not as researchers, but as collective problem solvers. A young Krellnak representative approached Sofia Gonzalez. Your species showed us that limitation is just an unrecognized opportunity. They said, their translation algorithms carrying a depth of emotion that would have been impossible years ago. Sofia smiled. We're still learning too. The holographic displays began to shift, showing potential collaborative projects, terraforming initiatives, quantum communication expansion, collective resource management. Each project was a testament to the new paradigm. Marcus Chen looked at the assembled representatives, a diversity that would have been unimaginable a decade earlier. Species that had been enemies, predators, prey, were now working together with a sense of shared purpose that transcended individual survival. "We're not just surviving," he often said. "We're becoming." As the assembly concluded, something profound hung in the air. It wasn't a sense of victory. It was a sense of possibility. The universe had changed, not through conquest, not through destruction, but through understanding. Humanity's greatest weapon had never been technology or strategic brilliance. It had been the capacity to see potential where others saw only limitation. And in that moment, the galaxy took another step towards something greater than anyone had ever imagined.